everyone, and welcome to the 582nd, or oh gosh, my brain's breaking, 81st episode of Constructed Criticism. I'm your host, Mason Dre, my co-host, Abe Stein. Abe, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm thankful that 581 is the right number and that you eventually got there, so we don't have to restart.
That's right. Yeah, and I think leaving it in, it's pretty good. It's kind of like a cold open, except they are normally funny. But I'll tell you what's not funny, Abe, is the kind of mental hurdle we're going to talk about that happens to a lot of players. And I think is a very common sort of thing in a Magic player's journey. And that's sort of the idea of being hung up in the past of who we are. And we're just going to hop right into it because we understand that, especially with the States, this is a busy time of year. You've got Thanksgiving and Black Friday, a lot going on. And I want to talk a little bit today, Abe, about this kind of reoccurring thing that's coming up in coaching and just in Magic in general, as you pointed out with Amulet Titan, which is this idea that this is too hard or I don't play these kinds of decks. And I just don't do this. And since I don't do this, I feel like I'm, in the bad spot or I could never get there, I'm ramp guy or whatever. And I think this is a very common thing in our normal lives that happens, but, people sort of move and deal with it that they don't translate to Magic. And so many things we talk about that translate from Magic to real life, that's a little surprising to me. Because, I mean, as you grow up, Abe, right, and you like, whether it's just actually from like adolescence to adulthood, but from like your 20s to your 30s, the things you like change, right? And you might be really big into musicals for a while or whatever, and then maybe turn more into someone who's interested in painting, right? Like that's a very common and normal thing that we change and grow and develop. And in Magic, that happens too, but some people really get fixated on sort of this identity that they can have, right? Like Abe, for a while, you were identified, lovingly here on the podcast as like Hammer guy, right? Because you played so much Hammer. And I was Four Color guy because I played so much Four Color. And Spencer talks a lot on the podcast about how he used to be, considered like the ramp guy locally. And people attach these sort of, names and identities to themselves and they get really entrenched in that idea, and when those things aren't good, they feel like they're kind of trapped because hey, I'm ramp guy or whatever, I can't play aggro decks or I can't play mid-range decks. I just don't know what I'm doing here, and we're going to really tackle that idea here today.
Yeah, and I think that, beyond just something that I know I've talked a lot about on the show of like not allowing yourself to be pigeonholed like that. But also, to your point there that your tastes or your even just skill sets will change or adapt or grow in other areas. What might have been daunting to you when it comes to playing Magic, a year ago, could now be something that you actually would really enjoy and find, really stimulating and exciting to do. Be it that I know a lot of people who really enjoy limited. And previously never liked touching it.
Mm-hmm.
Like draft was not for them. And they almost like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy of like, well, if I'm a constructed guy, I don't play limited, or I'm a
Mm-hmm.
limited person, I don't play 60 card formats. If you continue with that mindset, um, you're never giving yourself the opportunity to experience what it is you're missing and also to grow in that. And you wind up, creating um, a habit and a routine and a cycle of just doing the same things, which can still yield the results that you're looking for and might still help you meet your goals. But if your goals change and if, you want to continue hashtag always improving, you're not going to have nearly the amount of success just doing the same thing as you would otherwise. Because, like you said, people do change, and one of the things that sets humans apart from everything else and everyone else and every other living organism is that we have the capacity to continue to grow and learn and adapt at our own will almost. We are very very mentally agile creatures, and if you don't allow yourself to do that, if you keep yourself from doing that because you stick with one notion, you're only harming yourself and limiting your potential.
Yeah. I agree 100%. And I think also a common sort of barrier that people put up for themselves during this journey, Abe, is that's just not fun to me, right? I hear this a lot of, oh, aggro isn't fun. Oh, control isn't fun. Oh, this isn't fun, and there's definitely some truth to that for some people, right? Like you're going to vibe more with one thing than the other. But I really think the verbiage and the way we look at it is so important, right? Is it actually not fun, or is it maybe not as fun as playing ramp is, right? Is this like actually a miserable experience? Like no one's telling you to do that. And also, what are your goals, right? But I think a big barrier for a lot of people is they're like, oh, I've traditionally not liked this thing. I probably still won't like it. And going back to that, how in real life we grow and we change and things develop, I think the same can be true of Magic. For a long time, I didn't really like that many, like, I would say all in aggressive decks with like combat tricks. And now I've grown to appreciate them more. And would I pick that as my default deck if all things are equal to maximize both winning and fun? No. But can I play those and appreciate them a lot more? And actually, I've found a lot of fun in that. And it's really grown like me as a player and my, relationship with Magic 100%. And I think so often people fixate on what they don't like that they very rarely give themselves the opportunity to find something that they do like. And I think really looking towards the good and the fun and these sort of things is so pivotal to finding success in Magic. I think we've talked about this a lot in the podcast over these last 2 years, this idea of like find the good in things. And like, sometimes you end up actually really liking decks. Like I know a couple people who absolutely loved playing the VV deck, right? And they were like, "Oh, this isn't healthy for like the metagame or whatever." But I unironically enjoy playing this deck a ton. And for a lot of people, they talk about like how miserable that is, right? It's like, "Oh, how miserable must it be to play VV mirrors?" But a lot of these people are like, "No, actually, it was really cool and not something I normally get to do." And I think that's such like a great way to look at it. And I just want to highlight like when you're going down this route, you have to give these things time to grow and develop and to really show itself and for you to get your sea legs on because, you're not used to these things and you probably have some built up biases. And there's probably a lot of fun and good in there if you give yourself the time.
Yeah, I think you used a really powerful word there, which is appreciate. When you like, I know there are certain decks and certain like archetypes that I find no joy in playing, or at least at a baseline, I find no joy in playing. But through whether it is that they're the best deck for me to be playing, or even just becoming more seasoned and more worldly as a player, I've learned to appreciate what it is that's fun about that deck. I might not find an early example. This is actually a long time ago. There was a Boggles deck in Standard, and I had a friend who like really loved playing it and top 8 at a couple events with it. And I was like, clearly this deck is good enough if you're top 8ing with it. Like, let me give it a try. And I did not like it, But fast forward to the modern format, where there were times where Boggles was good and I did consider playing it. And, I found a way to appreciate what the deck was doing and, really not limiting myself from saying, oh, well, I know I don't like that, but rather saying like, what can I like it? What is enjoyable about it? What is strong about it? And sometimes what's enjoyable is just, well, I think it will mean I won't lose a lot of matches that, I feel like I should win. The games I win are not going to be close. Maybe there's a matchup I just don't want to have to think about. Like, there's always a way to look for the good in things, or at least come in with an open mind, looking to be able to appreciate what it is you're playing.
And when you don't, oh, sorry, finish.
And when you don't do that, all you do is, tell yourself that there's nothing there to appreciate when clearly there is, right? Your friend might be, you might be a control player. Your friend might be a devout, I'm going to play mono red guy, but like, at the end of the day, he does that or they do that because they actually really like the archetype. There's clearly
Mm-hmm.
something to enjoy there. Try it, eat your friend's ice cream, see what flavor they like. Like, give it a try.
Yeah, I think this thing we're talking about here too, you can apply exactly to deck selection as well, right? A thing I hear a lot from players historically is that deck's never good. In fact, to kind of, name a name of our friend here, who I don't think would mind this, Misplaced Ginger. This is the thing I hear him say a lot, right? And you can hear on his stream where he's like, those kinds of decks are never good. Or that type of deck's never good, is the thing Derek has historically said a lot. But with time, he's actually kind of grown to appreciate and see that sometimes there are moments. And, if you're going to play 50 moto challenges a week, is that the best option? Probably not. Is it a good to maybe even the best option on one of those 50 challenges? Probably, actually, right? Like things do change and there are moments. And so, kind of, putting things in these boxes in Magic and sort of, swearing them off or thinking you have to live by these codes, it's a thing that only sows sorrow, right? And it's only going to lead to sadness. So I would really suggest, if you're feeling like, hey, I can't do this, I'm not a player who can play an aggro deck, right? Like as we look to standard here at the new RCQ season, and players are very high on the Simic deck. If you're just traditionally like, I don't play aggro, if you have access to those cards, I would really suggest, giving it a college try, really see how it goes, and understand too that, I used the term earlier, but like as you get your sea legs for these decks, you're going to probably stumble, you're going to make some mistakes, and it's going to feel bad, especially for those first, like let's say 15, 20 matches, because you don't have that same experience of playing aggro decks as you do, let's say, mid-range decks, right? So you're going to make a lot of errors that feel dumb, and you're going to feel a little embarrassed because you made some silly mistake. But those will pass with time, and try and get to like the meat of the deck and see, whether it's good or bad and what's good or bad about it, and all these different aspects.
Yeah, and you also never know, like, what you might have learned, or maybe you do know what you might have learned. Maybe you are a control player who's finally understanding a little bit better how to, know when to turn the corner and assess their role.
Mm-hmm.
That skill translates to so many other decks. And maybe that is the piece that was missing for you to really enjoy and have success with another deck that might be in a better position in a metagame, or, just be more in line with what is the right thing to do. And if you don't take that chance, you never get that experience. Something that Jonathan Skennick once said to me, and I'm gonna have to paraphrase him here because it was a long time ago, but we were talking about improvement, and it was at a hotel in Charlotte, and he said that to him, and this is what I call the Skennick cycle, it really goes that you think you're really, like, you're winning a lot, you think you're really good, or really probably you start by thinking you're really bad, and you're like, I need to get better. And then you start winning a lot, you think you're really good. And then at some point you realize, I'm actually really bad, because you stop winning as much, or it stops feeling like you're winning as much. And you're right. And in that time you think you're really bad, you go back to studying, and you go back to, you have to figure out what it is you need to change in order to go back to that feeling of, I'm really good and I'm winning a lot. And in that time where you feel like you're really bad, you start looking through all the same places that you were looking before and seeing it with new eyes, because you are better than you were before. And when you get through all of that, you go back to that feeling of winning, and that cycle of going, oh yeah, I'm on top of the world. I'm great. I'm winning. I'm crushing. All my decisions are good. Then it's about those changes that you make and that reassessment period. And if during that time, where you think you're bad, you're not willing to make those changes, or you feel stuck, you're not willing to make those changes, all you will feel is continually stuck.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. And there's one more narrative I kind of want to break down here, before we wrap things up on our main topic. And that's the idea that you're going to be counter what you felt before, right? And you're sort of like, well, I've always been someone who's, said aggro's no skill as an example, right? Or, oh, I've always, been this sort of way towards these things. I've always said this. And I think this is maybe a bit more true for people who are like in our position or kind of, speak a lot or, are very loud about their opinions. And I just kind of want to quickly say, like, it's okay. Like, you could, I think a great example of this is I was very anti rhinos for a very long time in modern. And I think I was actually right for the majority of that take. And then I lagged a little bit on switching over when rhinos actually got good, when the format evolved. And I held on to my old beliefs a little too long. And I should have embraced kind of the change and, like, the way things were different now. And that doesn't mean that, I'm dumb or a bad person or a liar or anything like that. It just means things have changed and my opinions changed, and that's normal and good.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
Abe, anything else you want to say before we wrap up this topic?
You know, I think the only thing I want to say is that, and this I know I know exactly why I'm quoting Jonathan Skinnick so much, and it's because I spent a whole weekend with him over the weekend at PAX Unplugged.
Mm.
But he once said to me that if you don't think your life is perfect and everything is just as good as it ever could be, then it sounds like it's time to try something new.
I like that. I like that a lot. That's going to do it for our main topic today. If you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/ccmtg. The show will always be free, but if you want to support us, you can go there. And one of the perks is getting access to the Patreon only Discord. You can talk to other like-minded people in the community and us. Daily conversations, between either just like a random topic or the meta games or on certain decks. It's always very active. We love to have you there. And another bonus is you get to ask questions which might be answered here on the show, and some that don't get answered on the show get answered there. This week's question comes from Josh and is, how long do you typically take during a turn at Comp REL? How much for a complex turn? How often are your turns under 15 seconds? Say, draw, land, go. Abe, I'm curious, what's your sort of, off the cuff response here?
I would say my typical turn is probably in the 20-second range. I don't know. It's hard to say. I've never really thought about it in terms of actual raw seconds before. I do think that a lot of the decisions, and it depends on the deck too, but a lot of the decisions that I make are pretty pared down by the time that I've drawn my card. So, like, if my opponent has done something, or like throughout the game, I'm kind of figuring out what it is I need to be doing. So I know what cards I would be looking for in order to do that. But often, like, I only receive one new piece of information at the start of my turn, typically. So, and that new information is information I already kind of had access to. Like, I can think about what would happen if I drew any one of a bunch of different cards, or even just like, oh, if I draw a removal spell, am I casting that or am I casting this other thing? Is an example. Like, if I draw, like, maybe I have a threat in hand that I need to cast. If I draw a different threat, maybe I'll play that one instead. But I spend a lot of my mental energy and my shortcutting making sure that my new card drawn, unless it changes a lot about the turn, does not slow me down a lot. I'm not having to think through a bunch of options that I already knew about when my opponent had their turn on my turn. So I would say it's my turns are not typically very long if I'm not doing a lot. My turns that are more complicated, then it depends on kind of how and what kind of complication it is. Like playing VV Cauldron, for example, that deck had some pretty long turns because it was a lot of drawing and discarding and like optimizing therein. You're kind of like trying to make sure you cast your spells in the right order and seeing everything and, tracking everything. But even with those, like, that doesn't take forever. Now, if it's a turn where, like, I know the whole game is riding on it, depending on where we are in the day, like that turn, I might take, a minute or more in time really evaluating things. But during that minute, I'm also like taking actions and like getting to the stage where I know it's ready to make the pivotal decision, or maybe it's like I have my last removal spell, I need to cast it, or like am I casting this or this other thing? Like I'm kind of deciding the game on this turn.
Mm-hmm.
There, I'm willing to go into the tank, especially more not even because I'm getting older and the brain don't work so fast. I think it still works plenty fast. Um, but more so in that I've appreciated actually taking that time to evaluate the decision.
Mm-hmm.
More the more things have gone, and a lot of times my turns are um, pretty quick. I wouldn't say lightning fast, um, but like land go takes a couple seconds. It's really that process of shortcutting down to just the new card being the information, um, and kind of already thinking about some of those possibilities that are most important. That saves me a lot of time.
Yeah, I kind of in coaching, because this comes up every now and again. I describe it a lot like a train, and the first turn I also would say, especially if you're on the play, when you're mulliganing, you're already planning that turn, right? And it's very rare that something happens that you gain information about. So, like, kind of starting on turn two, that's the point where it's in a format like modern, at least, where like maybe your whole hand's playable or mostly playable. The engine starts chugging along. We're starting to realize I'm starting to think about like what does winning the match look like from here. That process is going in my mind, and I speed up as there's less hidden information, and I have less choices too, right? So I would probably guess that like, I think your answer of 20 seconds, I think is right for most turns that aren't, like everyone sort of agrees. Like turn one, you have no one drop and you have a land and you play your tap land. You know what I mean? Like outside of those, when the turns where I have to actually sort of engage with stuff, I would imagine 20 seconds is like how long my typical turn takes. Um, and a lot of that is, doing the same thing you're talking about, where it's like, what could I be drawing? What am I looking for? How do I think this game is going to end? How have I played this game? You know, and my opponent does only give me so much information. And sometimes, they're just like, draw, they have one card in hand, they play their land, they say go. And other times they draw and they look a little and they say go, or they almost do something. And like maybe with those other things happening, it adds a couple seconds because I have to parse like what would they have almost done. Maybe they drew an obliterating bolt and they thought about killing my let's say Preacher of the Schism, but they decided to hold it for something else. Sure, that's reasonable. Does that change anything? No. Okay, let's move. And so I would say, I kind of get going, and then I agree wholeheartedly with you about how when they get to the final turns, I slow down again. And once again, when a train is coming to a stop, it starts to slow down and gets to a position where it's like, okay, is everything good? I don't want to lose this game, and if I mess this turn up, or don't think about some card, it's going to add either more time because I'm going to play more turns, or maybe even a whole nother game if I was going to 2-0. It's better for me to add 5-6 seconds and double check my work, make sure everything makes sense, and then go for the kill, assuming there's hidden information. Or like, there's a very complex board state when it comes to combat, or, like you're attacking with a goblin bombardment on board and you're like, okay, they block, this is their best box. Okay, yeah, it actually is. All right, that's lethal. That would sort of be like some examples of what it's like, in my opinion. And I do think on like the complex turns, like there's a ton going on, etc. I would guess it hits more the 30 to 40 range when it comes to seconds. But I would say the majority of my turns probably are under 15 seconds, when it comes to like the ones where there aren't a lot of decisions. Or like honestly, when you've hit the end game with like control decks too. I've been playing a lot of that in Sand recently. I have a ton of 5 second turns where it's like I have an Elspeth in play. I've got a bunch of counter spells in hand. I'm gonna play my land. I'm gonna take up my Elspeth, make some dudes, and there's nothing that's gonna change. And I just like draw land, tick up, go. And like that's the play. And I just kind of know I need to maintain status quo. So there's a lot going on there. And I would say generally try to work on, if you're not already thinking about like what winning looks like and kind of what your potential draws are and how you want the game to end. If that's not something you're actively thinking about when you're playing Magic, I really would suggest that you start doing it. That will make your turns quicker. And I think your game planning and execution in games a lot better as well.
Yeah, I think also just shortcutting when you can
Mm-hmm.
helps a lot too. Like end of turn fetching, like just telling opponent, yeah, at the end of the turn I'm going to fetch or whatever, I'm getting this, like, just trying to establish those things, because a lot of time that turns take a while, and I feel like they shouldn't, is because of that back and forth communication or double dipping on the library or things like that. So that can just be a big help as well.
Yeah, fetch Sacred Foundry, here's my Ragavan, I'm going to shuffle on your turn, is like an easy way to save 30 seconds, if you just do that over the course of a match. Great. That's going to do it for the Patreon question. We're going to move on to Always Improving. That is the main point of the show. We really believe here about trying to get better in Magic or life in general. And Abe, I'll start things off with Always Improving this week. This past weekend, I did the RC commentary for Canada. We had a decent number of y'all watching, so thanks for coming out and doing that. I know we were competing directly with both SCG and Europe from multiple points. It was sick that Europe gave us the raids both times. I guess that's the benefit of SCG being on YouTube, is you can't raid them. You had to raid us, which was dope. But I got to work with Pastry Time, so I don't know how familiar you are with him, Abe, but he's a former League of Legends, like LCS, which is like their professional league caster, and he's a huge Magic fan. I forgot his name now. It's like Hungry on the Plane, but he does all those old Pro Tour history videos as well on YouTube. That's definitely not the name of his YouTube channel. I feel really bad. I'll make sure we put the right one in the description. But there's a lot of really cool, like, the story of the Pro Tour. Like, you've probably seen them on YouTube, like the worst deck to ever win a Pro Tour is the first video that I saw that he made. And it was really great to get to commentate with him. It was his very first time actually commentating a Magic tournament, but obviously has done, professional casting at sort of the highest degree when it comes to esports for, a long time. And getting to work with him was really great, because it actually felt like I leveled up my game a lot, because not only, am I adapting to kind of like this new style and someone who's so good, right, and really kind of raising the bar for commentary, I think, in the moment. Raising the bars may not get, like, kind of forcing me to like raise my standards and like really, lock into like matches energy, match, the flow and everything like that. And that was really good. I feel like sometimes in Magic we commentate a lot like golf, and in the way of like it's very kind of slow, methodical. We're talking about this, and I try to spaz that up a little bit, and like add a little pizzazz to it. But I think he did a really great job of kind of perfecting the thing that I try to do with play-by-play. So not only was it great to get to work with him and sort of be the expert role and kind of match that energy, I think it also really helped me crystallize how I want to do play-by-play when I'm doing that role again in the future, as I do a lot of switching between as sort of my partner needs. So that was sort of a great Always Improving moment that probably isn't applicable to a lot of other people. But I had a great time. Got a lot of very kind messages from a lot of you saying you really loved our pairing. And I can say that we both really loved it, and we hope Canada brings us back for the next one.
That's awesome. Yeah, I did not wind up getting a chance to watch much RC coverage at all, because I was at PAX Unplugged. But now I kind of want to go back, because that sounds like a great booth.
Yeah, we have a couple of pretty good Dom matches if you want to watch some Amulet Titan and get a little me and Pastry time in between. So it was also so fun to like Pastry to realize in real time that Dom had the turn 2 kill in one of those games, and he was like, "Wait, is it over?" And I'm like, "It's over." He was like, "I know this deck could do it, but oh my goodness, on the play, how is he supposed to ever win?" I'm like, "He wasn't. That's the fun part." So either way, it was great. What about you, Abe?
Yeah, my Always Improvement this week comes from just some stuff I've been doing to get a little bit more organized. Something that I got for myself about a month and a half ago was a whiteboard for my office. Just a little thing to make sure that I could keep track of like important information and like a bit of a to-do list. But what I did this week was actually like lay out, okay, like I have my priorities for not only for Magic, but also like for work and other things like personal projects. Like, here are 3 activities that I can do if I have an hour or more that are productive for me, and then just writing that out, really thinking through like what does it look like, like even highlighting for myself like, okay, exactly, like not only just like playing matches of standard or whatever, but like what can I be doing to make sure I'm more prepared for all of the things that tie into that? And what are the things that, leaving space there to be like, okay, maybe I need to play a match with, like, play matches with, Demir, or I need to play matches with decks that are, not Cub decks or whatever it is, like leaving space there to fill it in. And then making sure it's just displayed and kind of reorganize my desk to make sure that when I'm sitting here at my computer, it's always something I can see. So I'm constantly reminded of, like, what my goals are, and the steps I want to take to get there, so that I can make sure I'm crossing them off the list and not just, losing time or feeling disorganized or kind of forgetting, what all of the things I have going are. Sometimes I've found that my ADHD can make me really hyper tunnel on like one of these things for like weeks
Mm-hmm.
and then fall behind in others. And so I want to make sure that I have a way to track that and keep that organized.
Mm-hmm. I think that's great. I love sort of taking that action to try and like set yourself up for success pre-play. And I also found that it just in general makes life a lot like less stressful when you have that sort of stuff there, or even if you don't follow it perfectly, just knowing you have a general game plan, I found is great. So I'm super glad you're able to kind of do that. And I hope it's successful going forward.
Yeah, it'll be nice, hopefully taking the cognitive load off so that I don't have to remember every time that I'm supposed to be doing two other things.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel that. Also, it is Hungry on Plane. That is the name of the YouTube channel for Pastry Town that has a bunch of cool Pro Tour old history videos. I definitely check that out if you're someone who loves that kind of stuff. Thank you all so much for listening to this week's episode of Constructed Criticism. I'm so thankful I got to sit down here with Abe and do this episode. We miss you, Spencer. We're hoping you have a good time with your family while you're out this week. If you want to find the show anywhere on social media, at CCMTG is the place you can do it. If you want to find me personally, you can reach out on Twitter at Mason E. Clark, twitch.tv/the Mason Clark, and you can email me if you're interested in coaching, or DM me. My email is masoneclark@gmail.com. Just put coach in the description. That way I know you're not spam. Abe, what about you?
You can find me over at Blue Sky at More Nothings. You can also DM me there, or on Twitter at More Nothings, or send me an email at morenothings@gmail.com with coaching description if you're interested in looking for coaching. And yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Well, we'll see you all next week for another episode of CCMTG.